Welcome, Bronco Nation. This very exciting series. I got Ron Counts on today, and we're going to be discussing a little series I'm liking to call 10 and 10, where we're going to be covering the top 10 questions facing Boise State football in 10 separate, right about 10-minute segments. I'm, of course, Bronco Blamar. With me today is Ron Counts from the Idaho Statesman. For great Boise State coverage all season long, make sure that you follow Ron. Make sure you follow Idaho Statesman on Twitter. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, of course. And then Ron is also going to be writing an accompanying article with each of these videos, going a little bit more in depth about what we discussed today. So make sure that you go and subscribe to the Idaho Statesman as well, so you don't miss out on any of that great content. Thank you all for being here, and let's get to the questions. All right, so our question for today, the first one we're looking at is, will Taylen Green emerge as one of the top quarterbacks in the group of five? This is kind of a multi-dimensional question here, because the first thing you're looking at is, what does Taylen Green bring to the table? And then how does he rack and stack against the other group of five quarterbacks that are playing this year? So let's look at his stats from 2022. So 2,042 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, long of 52. He has 61.3% completion percentage. He also rushed for 586 yards. Big stat on that is a 7.2-yard average per carry. So, I mean, these just weren't little chunk yards. He was getting the big gains. Long of 91 and 10 touchdowns on the ground. Another significant sack, considering Boise State's experience in this area, is he only had 6 sacks on the year. So not only was he adding the running game element, but he's also staying alive in the passing game. He's a raw talent, probably one of the most athletic quarterbacks Boise State's ever seen. He's got a strong arm. He's great passing on the move. He is a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket, which is understandable considering some of Boise State's offensive line issues in the past. He's dealing with some consistency issues from last season, especially in the accuracy trends. And he has a tendency to force the ball a little bit. But there's also consideration that last year Boise State had an offensive line that was a little bit piecemeal and is still trying to develop. They had no clear number one wide receiver, and there was also the shifting game plans that he faced throughout the year. Ron, just talking about Taylen Green here first off.
Well, first of all, you mentioned that he's one of the best athletes Boise State's ever had at quarterback. I'm going to take it a step further and say he's the best athlete they've ever had at quarterback. Boise State's never had an athlete even anywhere close to what Taylen Green is. I mean, really, the closest comparison is your good friend Grant Hedrick. And he was an athlete, but he was no Taylen Green. He wasn't 6'6", 220 and running like a blazing 40 time. So Taylen is a ridiculous athlete. But you're right. He's very raw. He's very young. He's got some learning to do. And just like so many dual threat quarterbacks, he does his damage first with his legs. That's what comes naturally to him. You see it when he's in the backfield. He just spins away from defenders. He sidesteps them. He makes it look so easy because he's such a freak athlete. But like any quarterback, he's got to become a quarterback, not just an athlete. He's got to learn how to read defenses, how to throw the ball, when to make decisions, when to throw it away, when to take a sack, maybe even. So there's a lot of learning he has to do, as any quarterback has learning to do. But what we saw last year, especially when Dirk Cutter took over the offense, he grew by leaps and bounds. I mean, Taylen's completion percentage went up past 65% in the last 10 games of this season. He made better decisions. He found open receivers. He was on time. And that timing piece is huge this year. I talked to Bush Hampton and I talked to Taylen this spring, and both of them talked about timing and footwork. He's got to match his footwork to his release. He's got to know where the ball is going. He's got to get it out on time. That is the most important thing for any quarterback. So that's where he's got to grow this year.
How much of a leap do you think that he's going to be making from that year one to year two? Do we get to see fully developed Taylen Green this year, or is he going to still have some learning to do, you think?
That's going to be the question, because we don't know how much better the offensive line is going to be than it was last year. There's still no clear-cut number one receiver on the roster, so we really don't know. But just judging from how much he grew in the last 10 games of last season, he's got to take a huge leap this year, because he's working his butt off right now. We saw that he was working out with Jerron Johnson not long ago. He's been in Texas throwing passes. He's working on routes. He's developing chemistry. So I think he takes a huge leap this year. I think it's going to be tough, because teams are going to come in and they're going to make him throw the ball this year, because now there's film on Taylen Green. They're going to load up the box. They're going to make him throw the ball. And that's what he's working on now. So I think he takes a huge step in that area.
What kind of stats do you expect to see out of him this year? Like we said last year, over 2,000 yards passing, over 600 yards rushing. Do you expect to see a heavier focus on the passing game this year? What kind of development do you think you're going to see out of Taylen Green this year in the rushing and passing game?
I think that he's going to have to throw the ball a little bit more, because teams are going to load the box. But at the same time, they have such a dominant running game that, I still don't expect him to throw for any more than 2,600 yards this year because they're going to run the ball so much. Bush Hamdan told me that he expects Taylen to run the ball 10 to 12 times a game. George Halani is going to get 12 to 15 touches a game. Ashton Jeanty is going to get 10 to 15 touches a game. There's only so many plays to go around. So I wouldn't expect these, gaudy passing numbers this year. I can see, 2,500 yards, maybe 18 touchdowns, which would be a great, great development for him. But they've just got to make sure that they don't force him into running the ball. They got to make sure that he takes what the defense gives him, and they don't try and kind of force Taylen Green down the defense's throat.
Wow, 2,500 yards, maybe about 18 touchdowns, and then getting close to his rushing numbers last year, if not exceeding that, so 600-plus yards rushing. That's a pretty successful season, but how does that stack up against the rest of the group of five? Because the question here is, can he be one of the top quarterbacks in the group of five? So looking at some other guys around the league, Mountain West, you got Chevin Cordero is probably his biggest threat right there. He's a senior, played at Hawaii a long time, over 3,000 yards rushing, had over 3,000 yards passing, had over 200 yards rushing last season, over 30 touchdowns overall. Out of AAC, you've got a few great guys here. Memphis's quarterback, Seth Hennigan, over 3,000 yards passing himself, over 3,500 yards passing, 22 touchdowns. Tulane's quarterback, Michael Pratt, another 3,000 yards passing, Cotton Bowl champion against USC. UTSA's got Frank Harris, who's probably the biggest quarterback here in first year for UTSA, moving into the American Athletic Conference. 4,000-plus yards passing, or 600 yards rushing. Similar rushing stats there to Taylen Green. Conference USA's got Hank Bachmeier, of course. We're going to see how he's going to change and develop in that offense. All the best to him. And then Western Kentucky's got Austin Reed, who passed for almost 5,000 yards last year, 4,700 total, 40 touchdowns. Mac has Toledo quarterback Daquan Finn, 2,000 yards passing, 600 yards rushing plus on both of those elements. So again, dual threat guy. Ohio's got Curtis Rourke, 3,000-plus yards passing, 25 touchdowns. And then just wrapping it up here with the Sun Belt, you got Carter Bradley from University of Southern Alabama, 3,300 yards, 3,336 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, led the Jags to a 10-3 record, 7-1 overall in the Sun Belt. And of course, Coastal's Grayson McCall. So that's about 10 guys that I named off there. I'm sure I missed some. How do you think Taylen Green stacks up against these guys and any other quarterbacks you'd like to mention when you're talking about the group of five based on what we expect him to develop to this year?
Well, first of all, I had a lot of those same quarterbacks written down, and I broke them down into a three-tiered system. So at the top, on the top tier, you've got Michael Pratt from Tulane, you've got Grayson McCall from Coastal, and you've got Frank Harris from UTSA. Pratt and McCall and Harris really feel like they've been there for 10 years. Like these guys got to be 6 and 7 year seniors. Frank Harris is probably the best athlete of the group there. He's got a 31-9 career record. He's thrown for more than 9,000 yards, rushed for almost 2,000 yards in his career. So he's maybe the best comp to Taylen Green, although he's not as big as Taylen Green. So those three, I think, are the top of the tier in the group of the five. Now you go to that second tier of quarterbacks. You mentioned our old friend Hank Bachmeier, now at Louisiana Tech. He's thrown for more than 6,000 yards, 40 touchdowns in his career. Curtis Rourke from Ohio. And then those are only my two tier 2 guys. And then that third tier, you come in with Chevin Cordero, Austin Reed, and Davis Brin at Georgia Southern, who's a guy that I think is going to make a lot of noise. He transferred from Tulsa. He started 22 games there over the last couple of years, 31 career touchdowns. So I think those are your top 8 group of 5 quarterbacks in the country. Where does Taylen fit in there? I think he falls somewhere in between that second and third tier right now, just because he doesn't have the body of work. He's a better athlete than everyone on this list, more than likely, but he's nowhere near experienced as a Michael Pratt. He's nowhere experienced as a Grayson McCall. Heck, I mean, he's not as experienced as a Hank Bachmeier. So he's got to still go through those trials and tribulations. He's got to earn those stripes still. But I think very much so by the end of the season, he'll be closing in on that top tier. And by next year, he could be the best quarterback in the group of 5.
Well, this is definitely going to be a proving ground for a group of 5 teams in general as they set up for that CFP bid in 2024. And so Taylen Green coming through here in his sophomore year, he's setting up for that big junior year. He starts off as, like you said, second or third tier in the group of 5, but he can end the year in the top level, start developing that hype for 2024. It's going to be an exciting one to see as Boise State and Taylen Green try to set themselves up for success in 2024. We're hoping for a great year. I do agree that if he has the year that we're projecting with the rushing and the passing game improvements, I think we'll see a Taylen Green that is underappreciated right now, but not that way at the end of the season. Definitely getting the media attention he and Boise State deserve. So, yeah, I'm excited for this one. I think it's going to be great. I love this discussion. I'm excited for the rest of this preview series. Like I said before, make sure you like and subscribe to all of our content. Ron Counts, Idaho Statesman. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and also subscribe to Idaho Statesman. And next time, we're going to be discussing Boise State. Will they break their single season rushing record? And then again, and a second question on top of that is who's going to be the main carrier of the load that year? So thank you so much for watching today. Thanks so much for being here. And as always, make sure you like, subscribe, and go Big Blue.